Hey, well, tonight I'm angry at our descent into third world status. And what I'm talking about is the fact that we see our critical infrastructure failing everywhere around us. Whether it's California last year with the utility unable to provide enough power and causing forest fires with the fact that they didn't maintain their equipment sufficiently, or whether we're talking about Texas and the fact that they didn't winterize a nuclear power station, they didn't prepare for a winter storm. Either way, this country seems to not be able to depend on critical infrastructure anymore. Let's look at this most recent example, which is this cold spell that's come down, and everybody's claimed that this is entirely unpredictable, record-setting, no one could have predicted it, etc., etc., etc. This is not true. Let me give you some facts. Let's start with a chart that you can evaluate. This is the temperature chart. This shows the temperature in Oklahoma City over about the last 120 years, from 1890 through about 2021. And you can see the normal expected temperature range is the gold band in the middle, where the high temperature is the red mark and the record low temperature is the blue mark. And you can see that even though we almost equaled the previous record low, it was not a record low, and not only was it foreseeable, but it was predictable. If you've observed weather for any period of time, you have to understand that if you've seen the weather patterns for 100 years, the chances that you've seen the biggest storm or the hottest summer are essentially almost zero. But the fact is that they did have data for what the coldest and hottest temperatures had been over the last 120 years, and they were not prepared even for a storm that occurs once a century. And people have died as a result. We don't even know how many people have died in Texas. We know that in California, people died. In Texas, people have been frozen to death in their homes without water or power, frozen to death in their homes, frozen to death on the streets, frozen to death wherever they might happen to be when the temperature dropped, because the utilities cut off the power, which caused the water systems to fail. Why did they cut off the power? Because they were not prepared for a weather event of this type. Why were they not prepared? Was it unpredictable? Here are some figures. This is from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And you can see, first of all, this is the history of Dallas-Fort Worth in terms of the record low temperatures. In the huge blizzard of 1899, temperatures in Dallas reached -8. They did not reach that low this week, but you can get some idea that there have been many occurrences where the temperatures in Dallas dropped below freezing. Anybody who claims that it was entirely unpredictable that there could be a freeze is a fool or an apologist for the electrical utilities. This was foreseeable. Here is how low the temperatures actually did get in Dallas. This is from the Dallas Morning News. And the first argument I have is that they point out that Dallas-Fort Worth notched a new record low temperature of -2. First of all, that's not a new record low. And secondly, they acknowledge it themselves by pointing out that it wasn't a record low, but only the coldest day in the last 72 years. Why are these utilities, why is this infrastructure not prepared? There are many reasons, whether it's paying exorbitant salaries to executives, whether it's diverting maintenance funds to stock buybacks. Whatever the reason, we as the citizenry really don't care. The fact is we are demanding that these utilities, that this infrastructure be reliable. If we are determined to be a first world country, this is a demand that needs to be met. The mark of a third world country is infrastructure failing, having to have a generator in case the power goes out, having to have a well in case the municipal delivered water goes out. Not being able to rely on the infrastructure is the mark of a less than first world country, and I blame these utilities that have been run by executives that have extracted the maximum that they can from the companies and spent as little on maintenance as possible. These storms were entirely predictable. The damage has been entirely preventable. The fact that the money has been diverted to other causes, the fact that people now claim that this was a surprise, unpredictable, who could have known? This is always the cry, who could have known? We did know. If you were in the business, you should certainly be looking at what the worst storms were of the last 150 years, or at least as long as recorded history is in that area, so that you can prepare for what seems an entirely likely event, that every several decades there will be a century level storm. Neither of these utilities prepared for these events. The citizenry themselves are the ones who are suffering. We need to demand more. We need to arrest the slide into third world status. We need to demand more, and we need to wake up.